I was fired because of a tweet I didn't even post. At exactly 7:01 a.m. on a Wednesday, my inbox lit up with a subject line that felt like a death sentence in the corporate world. Urgent. Digital conduct policy violation. Immediate response required. No greeting. No context. Just a link to a calendar invite and the chilling words. Mandatory HR meeting. Attendance non-negotiable. I hadn't even finished brushing my teeth. By 9 a.m., I was sitting across from Heather Quinn, the new VP of People Strategy, whatever that title means this week. She smiled like we were catching up over lattes. "Natalie, we need to talk about your online activity," she said sweetly, sliding a printed screenshot across the table. It was a tweet. A vague, edgy statement about corporate hypocrisy. 4 years old. No username. No proof it was mine. Because it wasn't. "We've received internal complaints," she said. Several colleagues expressed discomfort. Omnova has a strict code of digital ethics, and this could reflect poorly on our partnerships. My pulse was a jackhammer in my ears. I wanted to ask, what colleagues? Who decided this? Since when is discomfort a policy breach? But I didn't speak. Because I knew this wasn't about a tweet. This was a setup, and I was the target. I'd seen it before. I wasn't loud. I didn't schmooze. I didn't join the Friday happy hours or laugh at passive-aggressive Slack memes. But I did have accessorial access to systems and data they didn't understand. I was the quiet one. The one they underestimated. The one they now wanted gone. Heather folded her hands, voice syrupy. "This can be a soft exit, clean, no need for escalation." I looked her in the eye and said nothing. Because they thought they were cutting off a loose thread. But they were about to unravel the entire contract. If you've ever been blindsided by office politics or watched your silence get weaponized against you, hit that subscribe button. Natalie's story is just beginning. They never really saw me. Not truly. In the 2.5 years I worked at Omnova, I became something like office wallpaper, always there, always reliable, but invisible unless the printer jammed or someone needed help resetting their login credentials. I wasn't flashy. I didn't bring cupcakes on birthdays or hang motivational quotes over my desk. I did my job every single day, without fail, without noise. And that's why they underestimated me. What they didn't know, what they never thought to ask, was that I wasn't just some mid-level data analyst pushing spreadsheets in the corner. I held Tier X security clearance granted by the NSA. That clearance wasn't handed to me. I earned it. Through a 6-month vetting process that peeled back every layer of my life, like an onion: financials, contacts, overseas travel, even my browser history. I'd passed every interview, every psych test, every home inspection. Twice. You don't get that kind of clearance unless the government trusts you to see things you're not allowed to talk about. And I never did. My official title was Senior Data Operations Coordinator, but that was just corporate filler. What I actually did was monitor and handle encrypted data flow for a joint federal communications contract, real-time infrastructure telemetry, encrypted transmission chains, geofencing protocol. I wasn't just playing with Excel formulas. I was holding together threads that could cost millions or worse if mishandled. Heather didn't know that. Neither did legal. Or PR. Or, frankly, half the executives I worked under. And I kept it that way. Because once people know you have power, they stop talking to you like a person. They talk to you like a threat, or worse, like a target. So I stayed quiet. I let them think I was just Natalie. The one who ate lunch alone. The one who didn't join the fantasy football league. The one who wore black turtlenecks year-round and kept a binder full of government acronyms nobody else understood. They'd laugh sometimes. Not cruelly, just casually, like people do when they assume someone isn't paying attention. "You're like a spy," one intern joked once, tapping the badge around my neck. "Hope you're not listening in on our Slack threads." I smiled. Said nothing. But the truth was I was listening. Not to their Slack memes or office gossip, but to the tone, to the shifting dynamics, to who copied who in what emails, who stopped looking you in the eye when something political went sideways. I paid attention. That was my job. It always starts subtle at the shift. The email that doesn't include you, the meeting that gets rescheduled without explanation, the awkward silence in the break room that follows you like a shadow. I'd seen it before in other jobs, but this time it felt different, sharper. Heather had arrived just 6 weeks before that tweet incident, and from day one, she seemed too interested in reshaping the culture. Not through collaboration, but control. Her favorite phrase, optics matter. Not performance. Not output. Optics. She was building something. I could feel it. And I wasn't part of the plan. But what she didn't realize, what she couldn't have known, was that the woman she was trying to erase was the only one holding the fuse. And it was already lit. It started with an invite that didn't feel like an invite. Just a subject line in my inbox. Quick sync. Culture alignment conversation. Scheduled for 3 p.m. sharp. No explanation. No attachments. Just a calendar block and Heather's name. I stared at it for a moment, my mouse hovering over decline, though I knew I wouldn't. Not because I wanted to go, but because people like Heather don't send invites. They set traps. And if you don't show up, that's another strike they can write down. So I clicked accept. When I entered the small glass conference room at 2:58, Heather was already there smiling. That perfect, glossy smile that never reached her eyes. The one she wore like armor. "Hi, Natalie," she chirped, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Thanks for making the time." There was a pitcher of cucumber water on the table. A box of tissues unopened. 2 other people I didn't expect to see. Riley Jennings, VP of Legal Affairs, and Chase Bennett, the head of PR. Riley gave a stiff nod. Chase looked away, already pretending he wasn't involved. I sat down slowly. Heather folded her hands, leaning in like we were discussing color palettes for a new website. "I wanted to keep this informal," she said. "Just a conversation, peer-to-peer." I didn't say a word. "There've been some concerns," she continued. "About tone, about how certain team members might be misaligned with our evolving culture." There it was, misaligned. The most corporate way to say we're looking for a reason to push you out. Heather pulled out a printed sheet from a manila folder. Slid it across the table. Same tweet. Still no proof it was mine. Still no admission of who complained. "Of course," she said, "we're not jumping to conclusions. But in today's climate, perception is impact. And with our new federal partnership on the horizon." I stopped listening. Because now I knew. This wasn't about a tweet. This was a performance. An orchestrated, paper trail-friendly performance meant to create documentation. The kind they could lean on later when legal asked why they let me go. Heather smiled again. Too wide. Too perfect. "We just want to make sure we're all rowing in the same direction." I looked at her, finally. Calm. Flat. "Interesting metaphor," I said. "Is someone planning to throw me overboard?" There was a beat of silence. Heather laughed, too loudly. Riley scribbled something on a notepad he'd probably never read again. Chase checked his watch. "We're not there yet," she said, voice saccharine. "But we'd really appreciate your cooperation moving forward. Maybe a short break, paid of course, could give you time to reflect and recalibrate." Recalibrate, like I was a malfunctioning machine. I nodded once. Just enough to end the meeting. As I stood to leave, Heather said one more thing. "We value what you've contributed here, Natalie. Truly. But cultural harmony is critical. I'm sure you understand." I turned back just enough to meet her gaze. "Harmony doesn't mean silence," I said. "Sometimes it just means you've muted the wrong people." Then I walked out. And as the door closed behind me, I realized something. They weren't just preparing to fire me. They were preparing a story. It happened faster than I expected. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 8:13 a.m., like I always did. Logged in. Sipped my lukewarm coffee. Answered a few emails. Nothing felt off at first. Then, at exactly 9:02 a.m., my screen froze. Not like a glitch. Not like a restart. Forzen. Cursor locked. Access denied. A second later, a pop-up appeared in the center of my screen. User credentials revoked. Access terminated. No explanation. No signature. Just a system-level lockout that only one department had the clearance to trigger. Internal security. My stomach turned. I reached for my phone, but it buzzed before I could unlock it. New calendar invite. Subject line. Final HR processing. Room 7B. Time. 9:15 a.m. Duration. 15 minutes. Location. Basement level conference room. The basement. I knew what that meant. That's where they send people they don't want others to see leaving. I sat still for a moment, letting the realization settle into my bones. They weren't building a case anymore. They were pulling the lever. By 9:12, I was walking the quiet hallway toward the elevator, passing cubicles where heads lowered a little too quickly. No eye contact, no questions. Just that awkward tension people get when they know something's happening, but they're too afraid to acknowledge it. The elevator doors opened. The basement was colder than I remembered. Room 7B had no windows, no art, no warmth. Just a single rectangular table, 4 chairs, and 3 people already waiting inside. Heather, of course. Riley from legal. And a woman I'd never met, Emily Roth, from HR compliance. She didn't smile. That was the only thing I liked about her. I sat down slowly. Heather started speaking like she'd practiced every word in front of a mirror. Natalie, thank you for coming. As outlined in previous discussions, and after careful review, we've concluded that your digital conduct has created a misalignment with Omnova's cultural integrity and expectations. She pushed a document toward me. 2 pages. Final notice stamped in red across the top like it was a parking ticket. You skim it. Nothing about my clearance. Nothing about my performance. Just phrases like tone inconsistency, external perception risk, and values breach. Heather leaned in, her voice syrupy. This isn't personal, we're just protecting the brand. I looked up at her. And who's protecting the truth? She blinked. Didn't answer. Emily handed me a small envelope. My final paycheck. A checklist. Instructions for returning equipment. I stood slowly. Calm. Not because I wasn't angry, but because I knew something they didn't. And it was this. When you work with government systems, especially ones protected by Tier X encryption, there are protocols. There are handshakes, time-locked scripts, internal redundancies. And when one of those access points is forcibly severed without formal offboarding, it triggers something. Something automatic. Something external. I left that conference room in silence. No shouting. No accusations. Just the faint sound of rubber soles on vinyl tile. As I walked past reception, my badge clipped to my hip gave one final beep, then turned red. Badge deactivated. And with that, they thought it was done. A clean cut. But they didn't realize they'd just tripped a wire. And the system was already blinking. I didn't speak on the way out. Not to the receptionist who avoided my eyes. Not to the intern who froze mid-step like she'd seen someone escorted to the guillotine. Not even to the IT guy who once asked me how to encrypt a folder but was now suddenly too busy to nod. It didn't matter. I wasn't there to explain myself anymore. When I reached my desk, there was already a box waiting. A brown, shallow thing that screamed, "Pack quickly, leave quietly." Nah dignity, nah apology, just cardboard. I packed slowly, not because I had much, just a few essentials. A framed photo of my niece. A notepad full of project logs. A mug that read, "Trust but verify." And, beneath my keyboard, my badge. The one with the Tier X clearance seal. Still cold to the touch, still encoded, still real. That badge had granted me access to encrypted tunnels, real-time infrastructure monitoring, and classified contract metadata. But now, it was just a silent witness. No one in that building knew what it actually meant. Not Heather. Not Riley. Not even the CEO. They saw a woman who didn't speak much. Didn't mingle. didn't play the game. But silence isn't weakness. It's patience. And I had been patient for a very long time. I placed the badge into a black envelope, thick, shielded, government issued. It read, "Property of UNSA, do not discard." Funny how they tried to discard me. I zipped my bag, lifted the box, and began the slow march toward the elevator. It felt like a funeral. My own. But even funerals are quieter when the dead don't scream. As the doors closed behind me, I caught one last glimpse of the office floor cubicles, blinking monitors, people pretending to type with straight backs and nervous glances. No one said goodbye. And that was fine. They'd remember me soon enough. Because here's what most people don't understand. When you're removed from a federal clearance contract, there are procedures. Not just internal HR steps, not just security badge scans, but external protocols, federal logs, digital redundancies, flag systems. And the second they deactivated my badge without going through those steps, they didn't just fire me. They fired a flare into the sky, a signal, and somewhere in a building much quieter than Omnova, someone would see that flare blinking. Not right away, not with sirens, but they would see it. They always do. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to shout. I had protocols. And protocols don't forget. It began the same way most quiet disasters do, without noise. 3 days passed after my termination. No emails, no calls, just silence. I didn't post online, didn't vent, didn't clap back with a LinkedIn manifesto. I let them think I disappeared, vanished into professional oblivion. That's what they wanted, anyway. That's what people like Heather count on: compliance through humiliation. But I knew better. I knew that sometimes the most dangerous systems don't make a sound when they activate. At 9:17 a.m. on a Monday, inside Omnova's 10th floor conference room, a meeting was underway. Executives smiling, shaking hands, reviewing slide decks for their next federal bid. Nothing seemed out of place until someone tried to pull up a document from the encrypted archive. And couldn't. Then another tried. Still nothing. Then someone else noticed the red banner flashing on their login page. Access suspended, contractor authority unverified. Across the building, systems began timing out. Cloud storage locked. Project dashboard stalled. IVPN keys revoked. Confusion turned to frustration. Frustration to panic. Because no one understood why. But I did. See, the T-Rex badge I'd carried wasn't just a credential. It was a Nodia handshake point between Omnova and the federal servers it had been contracted to access. That handshake had a timestamp. And a trail. So when they cut me out without using the formal off-boarding protocol, without alerting the contracting agency, without filing the security release, the system didn't just revoke my access. It revoked theirs. That's what they never understood. You don't get to opt out of protocol when you're playing in the government's sandbox. And somewhere, far from their conference rooms and cucumber water, the system had flagged the breach. A real-time audit had started running. One they couldn't see. One they couldn't stop. And the moment that audit touched the access logs and saw the signature, deactivation without formal clearance release, it triggered what's known as an interagency integrity ping. It's not flashy, not loud, just a quiet nudge sent to the Department of Contract Oversight and another to the NSA's Contractor Division. 2 pings. That's all. But in my world, that's the equivalent of pulling the fire alarm in a munitions depot. Back in my apartment, I wasn't watching any of it happen. I didn't need to. I knew the timeline. I'd studied the system. I'd helped build parts of it. All I had to do was wait. And I was good at waiting. At 11:42 a.m. that same day, a black SUV pulled up outside Omnova's headquarters. 2 agents stepped out, badges not visible, faces unreadable. They didn't walk like visitors. They walked like they belonged. And inside the building, Heather Quinn was still sipping her designer tea, unaware that a system bigger than her PR strategy had just pulled her name from a protocol list and moved it into an investigation file. If you've made it this far, you're not here for drama. You're here for justice. Hit subscribe because what happens next will change everything. It started as a rumor. Just a whisper in the hallway, something about a glitch in the compliance system. A meeting rescheduled. A shared drive that wouldn't open. Then it became 2 rumors. By noon, the whispers had turned into worried glances and rapid typing. Slack threads filled with vague questions. Is anyone else locked out of the audit logs? Did someone touch the federal channel protocols? Why can't I access the encryption gateway? No one had answers, especially not the people in charge. Heather tried to keep the ship steady. She held a staff-wide Zoom call, smiling, polished, calm. She said it was just a routine sync delay with the cloud provider. Just a hiccup. Nothing to worry about. But the IT director wasn't smiling. Neither was legal. Because while Heather was spinning PR-friendly explanations, the agents had made it to the 14th floor. They weren't there to knock. They were already in the executive suite by the time the second wave of alerts hit. Contract suspension flag. Executive access restricted. Half the leadership team lost their permissions in real time. Dashboards went dark. Files froze mid-edit. One project manager screamed when her screen shut down mid-presentation to the Department of Energy. And that was just the beginning. The real damage hadn't even surfaced yet. See, Omnova had been preparing to announce a new multi-year federal contract, $50 million in scope. Press releases were drafted. Celebration events planned. Bonuses already whispered about. But now, that deal was on hold. Because the agency they were working with had just received a red flag memo. Potential contractor breach under investigation. Suspend pending agreements. Deadle. Heather still thought she could manage it. She pulled together an emergency leadership meeting, locked door. No phones, no distractions. She didn't invite half the people who should have been in that room. Because this wasn't about solutions anymore. It was about control. But outside that door, the cracks kept spreading. Chase from PR stepped out to take a call and never came back. Riley from legal turned white as a sheet when the compliance log flashed his name beside the words, "Authorization bypassed. Formal clearance not recorded." He knew what that meant, even if Heather didn't yet. Inside the conference room, someone finally asked the right question. Wait, who handled the offboarding procedure for Natalie Monroe? Silence. Then Heather blinked. She didn't answer right away. Because the truth was she never filed it. She never sent the federal release. Never notified the contracting officer. Never logged the badge deactivation properly. She just deleted me. Like that would be enough. Like I was a file she could drag to the trash. Outside the building, the black SUV was still parked. Unmoved. Unbothered. Inside, the damage was escalating. And no one, not Heather, not legal, not even the CEO understood yet just how deep the cut had gone. But they would. Because collapses don't happen all at once. They start slowly. And then, all at once. 3 days after the systems fell silent, my phone rang. Not the cell I use for ordering takeout or ignoring family group texts. The other one. The one I kept in a drawer, turned off, battery removed just in case. I hadn't touched it in months. But that morning, something told me to power it on. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was protocol. At exactly 8:02 a.m., the screen lit up. Unknown caller. Washington, D.C. area code. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. Miss Monroe? A calm voice asked. Male. Steady. No accent. The kind of voice that gets trained, not born. Yes. This is Agent Nolan with the NSA Contract Oversight Division. We'd like a moment of your time. He didn't rush. Didn't threaten. Didn't explain. Just offered. And something about the way he said it told me this wasn't a request. Regarding what? I asked, already knowing. Your recent separation from Omnova. And the breach that followed. There it was. No fluff. No legal jargon. Just the truth. The call didn't last long. Under 5 minutes. No drama. No panic. Just facts. They knew I hadn't triggered the breach. They'd already traced the logs. They knew who cut the cord. And they also knew who built the system that flagged it. Me. We've reviewed your records, Agent Nolan said. Your work has been underappreciated. I didn't laugh, but I wanted to. Underappreciated. That's one way to describe being erased by people who thought LinkedIn endorsements were more valuable than federal protocols. There's a contract review meeting happening this afternoon, he continued. We'd prefer if you were present. Not as a witness. As a consultant. I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because, for the first time in days, I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief. Not revenge. Alignment. The world I came from, the one of encrypted briefings and invisible audits, wasn't glamorous. It didn't offer applause. It offered responsibility. And I had always taken that seriously. I said yes. Not because I wanted payback. Not because I wanted Heather or Riley or anyone else to see me rise from the ashes. But because someone needed to rebuild what they'd just broken. And I wasn't about to let the wrong people handle that. When the call ended, I stood by the window for a long time, coffee cooling in my hand, city buzzing far below. Somewhere out there, Omnova was spinning, trying to cover up what couldn't be covered, trying to explain what couldn't be explained. But I wasn't spinning anymore. I was grounded, because the truth has a funny way of surviving long after the headlines fade. You don't always need to fight to be heard. Sometimes, you just have to wait until the right people start listening. And finally they were. The last time I walked through Omnova's front doors, I was invisible. This time, I wasn't alone. I didn't need an entourage, just presence. Just posture. A security officer waved me through without a word. He didn't make eye contact, but he didn't stop me either. The clearance had already been arranged. I was expected. The elevator ride to the executive floor was silent. No background music. Just the soft hum of motion and the weight of what was about to unfold. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway I used to avoid. Framed awards lined the walls, recognition for contracts I'd helped secure but never got credit for. Now, those same contracts were at risk. And I was the only one who could stop the bleeding. At the end of the hall, outside the large conference room, 2 federal agents stood like statues. Not aggressive, not imposing, just watching. They nodded when they saw me. One opened the door. Inside, the air shifted. Heather froze mid-sentence. Riley stiffened. The CEO, Michael Brennan, stood up too fast, knocking his coffee over. No one said it, but the message was loud and clear. She's back. I walked in slowly, deliberately, like I had all the time in the world. Because I did. Agent Nolan took a seat beside me. Another agent, whom I hadn't met, remained near the door, eyes scanning the room like a human lie detector. Heather attempted a smile. It failed. Natalie, she said, voice a shade too high. We weren't aware you'd be joining us today. I didn't answer. Agent Nolan did. Miss Monroe has been invited as a federal consultant per Section 9 of the Contractor Remediation Clause. She's here to assist with the compliance integrity review. Michael tried to recover. Of course. Yes, we welcome any insight she can provide. But his eyes kept darting between my face and the unopened folder in front of Agent Nolan. They were all waiting for a blow they couldn't see coming. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to accuse anyone. I simply opened the file I had brought with me. Inside, a timeline of every flagged access point. A full breakdown of the unauthorized badge deactivation. Screenshots of missing audit trails. The missing clearance release form, still unsigned. I slid it to the center of the table. Heather didn't touch it. Riley leaned forward but stopped halfway, like the folder might burn his fingers. Michael cleared his throat. We may have had some procedural misunderstandings. I met his eyes. Number. You had options. You just chose convenience over protocol. No one argued. What could they say? They hadn't just fumbled paperwork. They'd broken a chain of trust with a federal agency that doesn't send second warnings. This wasn't about me getting my job back. This was about credibility, and theirs had already begun to dissolve. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there calm, centered, and finally seen. Because reckoning doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply walks in, pulls up a chair, and lays down the facts. After the folder hit the table, there was no more pretending. The temperature in the room shifted. Heather stopped blinking. Riley leaned back in his chair like he suddenly needed more air. And Michael, the CEO, who once gave a TEDx talk about leading with integrity, was sweating through his pressed collar. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. The facts were sitting there in ink and time-stamped screenshots, staring up at them like a mirror. Silence filled the room like smoke. No one wanted to be the first to speak. So, of course, it was Michael. Natalie, he began, his tone softer now, calculated, like I might break if he used too much pressure. Let's take a moment here. I think there's been some overreach. Miscommunication, perhaps, but we're willing to correct that. He gave a weak smile, the kind meant to bridge a gap he didn't understand. If you're open to it, I'd like to offer you your role back. With a title upgrade, and, of course, a significant compensation adjustment. Heather flinched beside him. That part hadn't been discussed. But he was desperate. And desperation has a smell. It's sharp and familiar. I let the offer sit in the air a few seconds longer than necessary. Then I looked at him and said, calmly, "You fired a security protocol." He blinked. I leaned forward, not angry, just clear. "You didn't fire me because of performance or policy. You fired me because I didn't play your game. And in doing so, you bypassed the very system that was protecting you." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You don't get to rehire trust, and you definitely don't get to rehire credibility. I saw it hit him. Not like a slap, but like gravity. There are things you can recover in business. Budgets, PR headlines, even lawsuits. But once the government marks you as a breach risk, you're no longer a vendor. You're a liability. He opened his mouth again, probably to negotiate, maybe even beg, but Agent Nolan cut in. This meeting isn't about rehiring anyone. It's about clarifying the extent of the breach and determining next steps. Michael sat back, lips pressed tight. Heather tried once more. "Natalie, surely you can understand this has been difficult for all of us. We never intended for it to go this far." I looked at her, really looked. For the first time, she wasn't polished. She wasn't smirking. She was small, frayed at the edges, and scared. I gave her nothing, because this wasn't personal. This was procedural, and she had ignored that from day one. You can push people out. You can strip titles. You can change locks and revoke access. But you can't fire a protocol, because it's not built on popularity or perception. It's built on accountability, and it always activates when ignored. When I stepped out of the conference room, the hallway looked different. Not physically. The same frosted glass panels. The same bland carpet. The same people pretending not to watch. But something had shifted. This time, I wasn't walking out in silence, carrying a cardboard box. I was walking out with something heavier. Clarity. A woman from the agency, Agent Maynard, was waiting near the elevator. She nodded politely, then handed me a sealed envelope. Simple. No logo, no fuss. Inside, a formal offer. Not from Omnova. From the federal agency I used to support in silence. A consulting contract. Independent. Senior-level oversight. 6-month term, with the possibility of extension. The mission? Restore the compliance pipeline Omnova had corrupted and help design a new system that couldn't be gamed by egos in designer suits. It wasn't revenge. It was evolution. And I knew what accepting it meant. It meant walking away for good, not just from a company that failed me, but from the idea that I needed their approval to matter. When I exited the building, I took the long way around past the side entrance, where junior employees usually took smoke breaks. That's where I ran into Tasha. She'd been an intern when I first started. Smart, sharp, nervous around managers, but brilliant with code. She blinked when she saw me. "Natalie?" she said, half whisper, like I might vanish if she said it too loud. Are you okay?" I smiled gently. "Yeah, I actually am." She hesitated. Then, "They said you just disappeared." I nodded. That's what they do, when they don't want to explain what went wrong. She looked down at the ID badge clipped to her belt, twisted it between her fingers. "I don't know how long I'll last here." I paused, then reached into my bag and pulled out a small, blank card, the kind you hand to people when something more official would just get lost in the noise. On the back, I wrote my name. A secure email. Slid it into her hand. "If it ever gets worse," I said, "don't go quiet. Send me a message." She nodded, eyes wide, like I'd just handed her something more than contact info. And maybe I had. Maybe I was handing her the permission I wished someone had given me years ago. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about the next woman in the back row, the one who kept her head down, did her job, and got steamrolled anyway. This was about making sure silence wouldn't be mistaken for weakness again. This was about choosing legacy over loyalty. Because loyalty to broken systems only breaks you in return. But legacy? Legacy is what happens when you walk away from the fire and build something stronger from the ashes. I never got a formal apology. No email. No letter. No public statement from Omnova acknowledging what they'd done or failed to do. And honestly, I didn't need one. Some truths don't require confession to be real. They live in the silence that follows the fall. In the systems that shut down. In the eyes that can no longer meet yours in a hallway. It's strange how quiet justice feels when it finally arrives. No music swells. No slow claps. Just air. Clean. Still. Undeniably changed. The day after I signed the federal contract, I took a walk. Not a power walk. Not some victory lap. Just a walk. No badge. No briefcase. Just me. Breathing in the version of myself that had survived the storm. I passed a cafe I used to sit in during lunch breaks. Same table near the window. Same chipped tile by the espresso machine. Back then, I'd sit there alone, headphones in, laptop open, pretending I wasn't bothered by being excluded from team lunches and fake celebrations. Now, I sat without the need to pretend. I didn't belong there anymore. And that was okay. I had built something stronger than belonging. I had built trust with myself. There was a time I thought speaking up was the only way to fight back. That silence was surrender. That walking away meant they'd won. But here's what I know now. Silence isn't the absence of power. Sometimes it is the power. It's the pause before the system corrects itself. It's the stillness that precedes a shift. It's the confidence to let truth move at its own speed, not at the pace of outrage. Because the systems that matter, the ones built to protect integrity, don't run on noise. They run on structure and discipline and people like me. For so long, I thought I had to earn respect by being louder, by proving myself, by defending every email, every policy, every minute worked after hours. But in the end, what spoke loudest was the protocol I wrote, the audit trails I double-checked, the digital footprints I left behind, not out of fear, but consistency. And when it mattered most, that consistency spoke for me, louder than any outburst ever could. The lesson? Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're invisible. Let them call you rigid, quiet, too cold, too serious. Because when systems fail, and they always do eventually, it's not the noise that saves anyone. It's the person who knew where the fire exits were the whole time. I finished my coffee slowly. No rush. No performance. Just peace. Then I stood, slipped the simple cream-colored card from my new agency contact into my pocket, and stepped outside. The world hadn't changed, but I had, and I wasn't going back. If you've ever been made to feel small for being serious, quiet, or prepared, subscribe, because your silence might just be your greatest strength.